Item number 10D, adopt a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute a cost recovery agreement with Artichoke Joe's Casino for police investigative services.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and members of the council. Artichoke Joe's is licensed through the State of California Gambling Control Commission and the San Bruno Municipal Code to offer limited authorized games where patrons can wager against each other. Artichoke Joe's is one of the oldest card rooms in the state and has been operating in San Bruno for over 90 years. The presence of a gambling club that operates 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, brings an increased risk of criminal activity. In order to prevent such activity, state and local regulations govern gaming operations and require that all employees undergo a background check before having a card room work permit issued by the police department. Artichoke Joe's takes measures to deter criminal activity associated with gaming, and they do so by maintaining a qualified security staff, camera surveillance of the casino, and they also conduct pre-employment background checks on employees. Despite these efforts to deter such activity, in March of last year, Department of Justice initiated and conducted a criminal loan sharking investigation in the casino that allegedly involved a few of the employees. As a result of that investigation, the Gambling Commission suspended Artichoke Joe's gaming license. Artichoke Joe's management advised they were unaware of this alleged criminal activity, and they cooperated with the investigation. Artichoke Joe's Casino entered into an agreement with the California Gambling Control Commission to reinstate the casino's gaming license, and they stipulated to several measures designed to deter and detect criminal activity inside the casino. These measures included significant upgrades to the casino's surveillance system. They hired a subject matter expert to train employees on how to recognize criminal activity associated with gambling, and they made physical changes to the gaming operation to improve visibility for management as well as security personnel inside the casino. An additional measure required Artichoke Joe's to coordinate with the City of San Bruno for an increase in law enforcement coordination related specifically to gaming and casino operations. Staff met with the president of Artichoke Joe's and his staff, and we proposed an investigator position dedicated to matters related to the casino that would fall under the purview of the police department. The investigator in this position would develop expertise in the detection of gaming-related crime and would initiate and maintain regular contact with investigators from the Bureau of Gambling Control in order to stay abreast of gaming issues as they relate to Artichoke Joe's Casino. The investigator would also handle all licensing matters related to the card room work permit requirement for casino employees. So this would be more of an investigator or a detective position. This wouldn't be a uniformed officer patrolling the casino. This would be a detective being trained by Artichoke Joe's subject matter experts in the field of gaming, interacting on a regular basis with the Division of Gambling Control, and we really want to build up the expertise in gaming to work with Artichoke Joe's to detect and deter criminal activity. Anything associated with alleged activity out of the casino would also fall under the purview of this detective, including all licensing matters related to work permits and employees. You know, the field of gaming changes rather frequently. The games that are offered at Artichoke Joe's Casino are approved by the Division of Gambling Control, but they also contain nuances. And we saw this as an opportunity to develop our expertise. Because this service is what's above our routine and everyday routine calls for service and requests for assistance, we felt that this cost should be borne by Artichoke Joe's. And when staff met with the president and Artichoke Joe's staff, they were agreeable to this and they concurred. What we did is we worked, the city attorney worked with Artichoke Joe's staff to develop a cost recovery agreement between the city and Artichoke Joe's, and that draft is before you tonight. The practice of cost recovery has already proven to be a successful means to assure that the city's ongoing ability to provide service to the community where those service needs exceed that which would otherwise be provided are covered. And a good example of this is the 2005 agreement with the shops at Tanforan, where we have 2 officers designated to patrol Tanforan, and that cost recovery agreement is picked up by Tanforan. Under the cost recovery agreement before you tonight, Artichoke Joe's would refund the salary and benefit cost of a police detective on an annual basis, including an allowance for any increases in salary and benefit costs. The amount of reimbursement for the first year of the agreement is $156,425. The city would bear the one-time added expense of hiring, training, and costs associated with providing safety equipment. So what we would do and how I envision this working is we would backfill for a police officer. So when I reference the training costs, that's the training cost to have a police officer on the street for patrol. I don't want to short patrol and I don't want to short our service to the community, so we would hire that person, get that person trained and be on the street, and then go ahead and make the initiative to hire a detective, working with Artichoke Joe's in our selection process, and then implement that detective position so there would be no loss of service to our community. I estimate those training costs of getting and replacing that basic officer at about $19,000. And again, that is safety equipment, and that is the cost of the training while that officer obviously meets the mandated training set by the state and our department standards. The agreement and the cost recovery agreement for Artichoke Joe's initially would be for 4 years. And we insisted on that because it's going to take 4 years to get that investigator up to speed with all of the nuances associated with gaming. And then thereafter, the agreement would automatically renew every 2 years. We did also agree to meet with Artichoke Joe's on an annual basis to review that position and see how that's working. So that, in essence, concludes my presentation, and I will be happy to try and answer any questions you may have.
Good. Any questions of the chief?
Through the chair.
Rico?
To the chief or city attorney, in the agreement on page 52 under agreement, section 1 with the last sentence, it says the chief shall have the power to postpone the deadline of the termination notice for good cause. And I know I brought it up prior to the meeting to staff, and I was wondering if they've had an opportunity to review that as to the rationale for that in the agreement.
Yes, we'd like to thank you for noticing that, and we had a discussion about this at our staff meeting this morning with the chief, and actually it raised a point that we thought was worth amending some of the other provisions of that paragraph to make sure that the city, as well as Artichoke Joe's, had the ability to terminate the agreement and then just remove the last sentence that you referred to. So we ran those changes by the Artichoke Joe's attorney this afternoon. He said that was fine. And so I think that provides the city with the flexibility that it needs, and as well as the notice that it's entitled to if Artichoke Joe's decides to terminate. So thank you for bringing those up.
Thank you, and I can say, because I was looking around Posey Park in the 700 block over the weekend, and I went through Artichoke Joe's, and I can tell you, it was busy, which I guess is positive in some ways, but it also had me just to think about the games that go on and the activity and trying to understand it better. And I was starting then to realize that this agreement would assist, I hope Artichoke Joe's, but in addition to the San Bruno Police Department, because obviously things evolve, things change in the gaming business, state laws, etc. So hopefully this is a win-win for both sides, and I'm glad to see that you met with the Artichoke Joe's president and staff, and they were in concurrence to that.
And Michael?
Thank you. Can I ask you to...
Sorry, can I ask you to repeat the part about how the staffing would work? You said you'd be hiring a new officer.
Sure.
Okay, and
So what we want to do is we want to hire, we're going to put and staff that position with a detective. Before we do that, we want to hire a replacement officer for that individual, or for that detective. So we're going to take one of our existing officers that's on the street and move them into a detective spot. So we would go, subject to your approval tonight, what we would do is we would go and we would begin the process to replace that officer on the street. We would go through the hiring process, have that officer trained and on the street, and then go ahead and move to fill our detective position. Now, the interdepartmental assignment for San Bruno Police requires at least 2 years experience and a variety of other qualifications for an officer to receive an interdepartmental assignment. Our detective positions are typically 3 years. I foresee this card room investigator position as going at least 4 years with an optional 5th year to extend, because we are going to develop that expertise in that investigator. So I hope that answered your question.
Yes, it did, absolutely. And what percentage of that detective's time would we expect to be dedicated to Artichoke Joe-related investigations? Is that going to be 100% dedicated to that?
I would say that it would probably be 90 to 100%. And in our discussions with Artichoke Joe's, we wanted to make it perfectly clear that we may need that investigator to work on another case. And we may have to reassign that investigator to a more significant urgent matter. Or our investigation may begin at Artichoke Joe's and then lead to another area in the city. And that would be the purview of that investigator. So Artichoke Joe's has an understanding that while we are going to try and devote that investigator to Artichoke Joe's, it may not be all the time, and that purview remains with the city.
Okay. And another concern I had is that we seem to be developing an expertise for, I don't want to say for the benefit, but it ends up being for the benefit of one business that operates in our city. And if we were Las Vegas, we would have a vested interest in developing that expertise. But when we're doing it for the benefit of one business that operates in San Bruno, I'm wondering if there are examples in other cities where they've had to do something similar.
Sure. Back, and I can't be specific on the year. I'm going back several years, and I'm getting older. But several years ago, San Jose has several card rooms in their city. Several years ago, there were issues related with organized criminal activity trying to infiltrate the casino. As an outcome of that, San Jose developed a gaming bureau of their detective division, and I believe there are not one but several investigators and supervisors solely assigned to, I believe they have 3 card rooms in San Jose. So it was more out of necessity, and I think it's a mutual benefit. Back in March, when this Department of Justice investigation hit Artichoke Joe's, we were just as surprised as was Artichoke Joe's. And it clearly pointed out the need to us that we need to develop expertise, not just for Artichoke Joe's, but to keep our community safe from potential organized crime that can come in and see a gambling establishment as an opportunity to continue illegal activity. And so I saw this, and I think Artichoke Joe saw it as well, as an additional means that probably was long overdue and is needed in the community.
Okay. And a question to the city attorney just regarding the public's perception of how this might be, and would there be any legal standing for someone in the public to say this is too cozy of a relationship between the city and an individual business, regardless of how much they contribute to the general fund? Is there a potential there for someone to call foul?
Well, I think the paragraph 5A of the agreement makes clear that the police detective is an employee of the city, and we have sole and absolute control over what that individual does. So I think from a legal standpoint, the city is well protected.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Through the chair.
Yes, Mayor.
Based on what the chief just, the last statement you made as far as looking out for the safety of the community and such, I'm concerned, and I realize that the agreement must have some caveats on termination or length of term, whatever. But where does the Bureau of Gambling come in? I mean, this is all spurred on because of that investigation, and it appears that through discussions and through the city's interest that we have this detective within the perimeter of Artichoke Joe's, or working closely with Artichoke Joe's. So it wouldn't be upon Artichoke Joe's or even the city to consider terminating this agreement, wouldn't it? What would the Bureau of Gambling say?
With the Bureau of Gambling Control, we did discuss that with investigators while this was under consideration and negotiation. They too felt it was a good idea. Cuts in California are also eliminating several positions in the Bureau of Gambling Control, making this position even more important to providing public safety to the community, especially around the casino and the outlying areas. So one of the goals of this investigator is to maintain constant contact with the Bureau of Gambling Control, something that hasn't been well established in the past, and something that I agree needs to take place.
Well, what I'd like, what I'd like to know is that, I'd like to think that this is a change, that this is something that is going to be approaching permanency, like how long has Tan Fran paid for police presence? Nothing's going to change, because as long as there's gambling, even if economic times change or something, we have to have a presence there. So I guess, I'm a little more concerned, because 4 years can go quickly and everything, and all of a sudden we're into a 2-year term. It can turn at within any 2 years. So.
We haven't discussed this in terms of the termination clause and the 4-year and then 2-year subsequent to that. We haven't discussed that with the Division of Gambling Control. We certainly will. We have discussed it with and expressed our concerns over your comments with staff at Artichoke Joe's. Artichoke Joe's, in good faith, says that they want to continue this, and they see this as a benefit as well, but certainly wanted some protections in case the casino closed or in case something else occurred. And I think that's probably the best way I could characterize it.
I'd like to think that we've got a really good relationship with Artichoke Joe's, and that, in their best interest and our best interest, that we would maintain this new staffing. But I guess maybe it wouldn't hurt to incorporate it in the ordinance. Some form of what this is. Maybe go through it for a couple of years, and then maybe consider coming back and saying, yes, this is something that should be part of our gaming ordinance. Having a police employee involved in the day-to-day operations.
That's a good point, and it's something that I neglected to cover in the report tonight. One of the duties that I envision this investigator having is working with the city attorney and going through our municipal code and our ordinance related to gambling, and working with Artichoke Joe's, but to look at it and see where can we make enhancements in our ordinance to cover any safety aspects or any other areas that need updating, especially with all the changes in gaming.
Thank you.
Through the chair, one more question?
Yes, Michael.
Just one follow-up question. And I touched on this earlier with the city manager in terms of what this reimbursement, how much of the officer's salary or the city's added burden is this actually going to cover? And part of my question was, how much is this officer going to be dedicated to just Artichoke Joe's business? The other part of that is, how much of the salary are we actually, or how much of the city's cost does salary and benefits cover? And what are the other costs that aren't covered that the taxpayers pick up?
Sure. So in terms of additional costs other than the initial cost of replacing that officer and the $19,000 that was referenced earlier, and I should mention that we do have salary savings that is existing in the police department budget, that we should be able to absorb that $19,000 without adding any increase to our budget. But in terms of ongoing long-term costs, I would estimate that probably safety equipment at maybe a couple of $1,000s every 5 years would be encumbered. In terms of a vehicle, I foresee us using our existing fleet, so none of that was factored in or added in. And in terms, it's all salary and benefits associated with a police detective. So that includes any incentive pay that the officer gets for being a detective, education, uniform allowance, et cetera, all covered under the benefits section.
Okay. And overtime, is that a factor at all in this position?
That we did not factor in.
Okay. All right. And any other things that are part of the, I mean, it did reference changes to the MOU, but are there things in the MOU that officers generally, and I don't know specifically what other things they're entitled to, reimbursement for books, classes, I'm just, you know, anything else that's included in there that if we weren't adding another position that we wouldn't necessarily be taking on?
Those costs per the officer may reach in the $1,000 range, depending on the officer and depending on the individual appointed to that position. And I guess we could go back to Artichoke Joe's and point out that this is a benefit, and the contract and the agreement covers salary and benefits.
Well, through the chair, I think it does cover all benefits.
That would be
including the
included.
benefit you're referring to.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Yes. Yeah, and this calculation is made on an annual basis, so it's not an ongoing $156,425.
There would be adjustments
Each
made.
year it changes, and so.
Right. And if this does become a very long-term agreement, then is there any impact to retirement benefits of having an additional position that wouldn't be captured by this agreement?
Not that I am aware of.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
And just Councilmember Salazar's comment about the overtime, if we had a situation which occurred in March, when DOJ came in, that if we had a person that was dedicated toward that, obviously they would be very engaged in what was going on, I would assume, with the whole process, which would mount probably a lot of overtime. If we had a situation, I'm not trying to hope for it, but if worst case scenario, if something like that should happen to where all of a sudden we are seeing an overtime issue or concern, is there any way for us to address that at the next year or when that comes up for discussion?
Correct. We intend on meeting annually with Artichoke Joe's to review this position, and that is something that we could take up with Artichoke Joe's and ask Artichoke Joe's to include in the agreement.
Thank you. I would recommend and suggest that because I think, as the councilmember brought up, we're looking at all the costs, and the city itself is going to put in the $19,000 and the periodic a couple thousand every so many years. But in essence, they are picking up everything with the exception right now in the agreement of the caveat of the overtime is not really specified.
Correct.
So that is something I would suggest us at the next time it's reviewed is to review that and see where we're at.
Any questions, discussion, action by the council?
Through the chair,
Rico?
go ahead and introduce the resolution for adoption, please.
Councilmember Medina.
Aye.
Councilmember Salazar.
Aye.
Councilmember O'Connell.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Ibarra.
Aye.
Mayor Ruane.
Aye.